Okay, so again, I'm on the internet and I've seen a big argument today and over the last week about a subject called cant. Cant is poorly understood and it's an area of ballistics that's important. One of the things that I saw postulated today on the inner tube that frankly caused me to cringe is some hose bag came on all knowledgeable and acted like he said that as long as your point of impact, let's just start with the fact that here's an eyeball, put some eyebrows on there so you can see, and it looks in a straight line. That's all an eyeball can do. That's what eyeballs do. Anything we look is essentially in a straight line. This is how transits work. An old school optical transit is nothing more than a rifle scope mounted on a leveling device with degrees of radians or degrees built into it so that you can swing through an arc this direction, and you can level this direction, and you can thereby establish points in space. And it's based on the fact that even through atmosphere, vision is essentially linear. It essentially goes in a straight line. Not completely true, but close enough. So, you're looking like this, and over here, you're looking at, whoops, trying to elongate, screwing it up. You're looking at a target, with this being the X in the middle. Now you're back here throwing a football to hit that target, or you're shooting an arrow to hit that target, or you're shooting a gun to hit that target. But in any case, you're sending a projectile out, and that projectile intersects with the target at the same place as your line of sight. This is basic ballistics. This is the law of. And if you're shooting a slower bullet, you need to elongate higher. If you're throwing a football, if it's very far away, as you can see, you can make everything intersect with this target. But to do that, you have to understand exactly how what's being accomplished. This is why tuning is yardage specific. Your barrel is actually back here vibrating, and if a gun is properly tuned, it's oscillating or vibrating such that the slower bullets leave on the higher angle and the faster bullets leave on the lower angle, so that they both get there, and gravity drop is negated by the fact that the gun is aimed at a different place. Now, on the subject of ballistics and gravity drop, when I was in 7th or 8th grade, or for a science experiment, I proved empirically, or I showed, that gravity drop is the same regardless of distance. I almost said irregardless, which is a word that I find to be funny. Basically, in the room, in the science room, I picked a wall and I hung a target. And back here, I mounted a blowgun on a gimbal assembly. And I sighted through the blowgun and I lined it up with the center of this target. Centered. And I locked down my gimbal. Then I took electrical contacts and I ran them up to an electromagnet right here. Power source down here. To my electromagnet. And a set of contacts right here. Such that by aiming through the tube, I lined up on this target, and because of these wire contacts right here, when I fired the blowgun, regardless of velocity, it would break these contacts open, allow the dart to do its thing, and it would go up. Now here's the thing, here's what I was proving, here's what I was showing. By visually looking through this blowgun tube, which was 6 feet long, and lining up at the center of that target, then I had to adjust it once, but I had it real close. And the reason I had to adjust it once is because the tube had a little bit of curvature in it. But bottom line is I electrify the circuit, I hang the target, hung the target, blowgun dart leaves, breaks the contact, the target starts to fall. Now, the simple fact is that once I had it sighted in, I had to move it once, just about 1/4 of an inch, because it was hitting to the side, not the... No matter how hard or soft I fired, I could catch the target here. I could catch the target clear down here. My last shot, I puffed it really slow and I caught the target just before it hit the floor. And still, I hit the target. Proving, showing that the gravity drop is equal. This was dropping through the air at the same rate that my dart was dropping through the air. So therefore, I couldn't miss that target. Now, what that means is, and the reason tuning is important, is because when you're shooting a bullet at a target, the target is not moving, it's not dropping to match the bullet. Therefore, you have to shoot in such a way that the bullet arches up to hit the target. If you could line it up so that the target fell at the same rate, you could just point at it and shoot, and the two would intersect. Boom. That's not the way the real world works. So I bring you to that just to show, to bring you up to the subject of something called CANT. Ballistics is poorly understood, but worse than that, is speculated about a lot. And watching this speculation about CANT basically destroys my faith in humanity, because people refuse to think. Simply refuse to think. So I'm driving down the road. This was last night I was reading this, and then this morning while my kid was in Sunday school, it's Sunday again. And I'm driving home and I thought, you know, I might be able to structure something, because the hard part is, for the visual thinkers, is structuring what's going on. I draw these pictures and some people just glaze over. But the bottom line is, a good quarterback gets out, he's looking for people, he sees somebody out there at 65 yards and he fires, but it goes, clears receivers and comes down, bam. Or if there's a bunch of people in the way, he fires high and he drops, but that allows another guy to come in and intercept. There's all these things to use football. But what you rarely see is the football shot from the back. So, I figured I'm going to diagram this. First thing I need to say is, when it comes to sighting, the oldest, most rudimentary sights, take the shot on Quigley Down Under. Most of you have seen Quigley Down Under. If you haven't, go watch it, because you must. On the Quigley gun, he's got to take a long shot, and he elevates his rear sight, he screws it up, and he gets the barrel sitting at an angle like this and the sights like this, and he punk, and the countdown, bang, he hits his target. That was without a scope. Now, soon after the Quigley type guns, the old, they now get called Quigleys, but it was the Sharp 73 that he was shooting. One of the first actually actual long-range accuracy platforms was the Sharps 74. And it had a rear sight. There was a lot of other contenders, but the Sharps was good. Billy Dixon really did knock the dude off the horse at Adobe Walls. If you don't know about it, look it up. And he's elevated so high, he just lobbed the bullet in. The reason this is relevant right now is because I'm engaged in this 50 BMG project, and some of these guns are getting such an offset between the scope and the barrel. This is the broken one. This is the one that I blew the muzzle brake apart on. I'm just using it for a prop today. muzzle brake is gone. But notice the tremendous separation here between your line of sight and the bullet originating down low. Now, one of the things that's come up with the screen door project, not only does it have a pretty tremendous distance between the two, so the bullet is originating down here on this line, going up through the line of sight, dropping back in. But for this gun to shoot accurately, and for me to hold it so that it can shoot accurately, this little 16-pounder, which might end up being a 15-pounder to prove my point, wants to shoot wicked slow bullets. What that means is the trajectory is very high. Doesn't change the accuracy at all, except that the fact, let's go back to that gravity drop thing that I had drawn up. When I had the blowgun set up and sighted in at the target, it didn't matter how fast or slow I shot, because the bullet's coming down, the target's falling at the same rate, and they intersect, so you hit the target every time. With a fixed target, variations in velocity mean that a fast bullet might shoot over the target, a super slow bullet's going to fall under the target, and only the perfectly timed ones are going to fall into the target. Which means that your extreme spread must be very solid. With an extreme spread of 10 feet per second, I can go out here to 1,000 yards with the screen door, this lightweight gun, and I can lob bullets, and the gravity drop effect will only be 4 or 5 inches, so I can still hit an elk. With a faster gun, the gravity drop difference shrinks. But this little guy wants to shoot at 2,200 feet per second. That means that influences due to gravity drop are magnified. Also, because the load is fired at such low pressures, I'm having trouble fighting to get good ES because extreme spread is the result of a very efficient burn. Air guns are known to be very efficient as long as they have an efficient spring to pop and let loose the charge of air, and as long as it's clean and as long as you keep the air tank, the first 2 or 3 shots out of a PCP air gun are amazingly consistent because a hammer drops, pops a valve open, gives it a charge of air, put, the pellet goes out, and then the next one and the next one, then they start falling off. Here we're actually burning a charge of powder, so it's hard to get it as consistent, but oddly enough, a really good BR gun is just as consistent as a good air gun, because the charges are burning very, very efficiently. With this screen door project, I'm having trouble getting that to happen. So, now that we know that you have a line of sight and you have a trajectory, it becomes easier to realize that these two things, the trajectory above the line of sight, if I turn around, they have to stay one above the other for it to go. If I am pointed right here, and I want to, and this is my bore, and I'm looking up here, and I want to shoot through my line of sight and straight down and through my line of sight again, that's the only way that I can. Otherwise, if I cant the gun so that I'm looking over here, and the gun's pointing in a different direction. This is one way I'm trying to illustrate. But to get back to the Quigley thing, he fired an extremely accurate rifle with open sights. Now, in his case, he was using a dot on a post surrounded by a peep sight. And this, of course, goes out. This is all darkened. And in this circle of air, you center up a peep sight and you adjust the height of the peep sight. And beyond that, way in the distance, is your target. And that's an extremely accurate sighting method for what I call shorter ranges, even though some of the shots that were taken with those old open sights were quite long. Now, after that came something called the scope sight, in which you take a tube and you look through a tube. And you'll find that you can look pretty consistently through the center line of a tube. I can get my eyeball in there if I'm any good. So you take this tube, and now you put an X in it called cross hairs. Hairs. because these pieces of string or spider web or filament must be very small. They must be hairs. And you look through this tube and you put the tube on the target, and there's your scope. You've got a scope above your rifle. So what I'm trying to show you now, I'm going to use this to try to illustrate trajectory. And I don't know if this is going to work or not. I don't think it is. But I'm going to try. I'll back this up and see if there's any way I can get this to illustrate a trajectory. This is my thought. This is the thought process I had coming down here, is that maybe I can allay some of the crap that's going on the inner tube from people who either are incapable of thinking this through or unwilling. I think unable. In most cases, people are unable to think their way out of a paper bag. So this tube right here is going to be the trajectory. Or it's going to be the line of sight, depending on what. For now, we're going to use it as the line of sight, and we're going to take this and call it a scope. And in this scope, we have a crosshair. So we're going to put a crosshair inside this tube, and we're going to say that we're looking straight through this tube at this target. Now for now, we're not going to talk about what the bullet's doing, but I'm going to try to illustrate how that works. I'm going to try to take this rifle stock here, and if I hold it right here underneath and I'm looking through this, now understand that if I pick it up like this and I'm pointing, now we're looking through this pipe, which is the scope. This is our line of sight. And the bullets are exiting, and they're going up through the air, and they're coming back down, and they're hitting the target, all right? This is that same drawing I had up there, but from the back. So understand that this is the tube you're looking through to a target, and we're going to just call this, I'll draw a little circle here so you can see that this is the target that we're hitting. We're looking at this now. From back here, we either throw a football or we fire a gun and we send a bullet up through the air. And so it's important that that bullet's flight go up through the air in a straight line and come back down in a straight line, straight above the center line of the bore. If we're not above the center line of the bore, if we tip or if we cant this over, and now we're looking at the target through a scope. This is where it gets hard to visualize, so you're going to have to bear with me a little bit. Remember, I'm going to use this gun again. We've got this gun sitting down here, and you point it up in the air to lob this bullet up and bring it back down to the target, right? Now when you cant this, you're still looking, forget what the gun does, you're still looking at the target, but now the gun cants and it sticks it over to this side, and you're going to see that if this is the scope, if this is the line of sight, what I thought about doing, and I'm going to do this now that I've talked enough, this is what I thought I should do to illustrate this. This is the gun shooting a very high trajectory, all right? Now, looking through this scope, nothing changes. I'm still looking at the zero, but if I cant the gun, notice how it does not matter how far above or below. The simple fact is that when you cant the gun is now pointed in a different direction. That bullet does not somehow magically intersect. It takes off in this new direction, and it lands way over there. You come this way, it takes off in this new direction, and it lands way over there. This can't, because remember, there is this necessary relationship between the line of sight and, now, Here we are a little more like, this is the gun down here shooting, this is the line of sight, which is the scope. And I need you to understand that the only thing that affects it is not where you're sighted in down here. The only thing that changes it is the distance between the center line of the bore and the center line of the scope. Obviously, smaller amounts of scope of cant move that gun further when you're way up here than they do down here. I mean, they move the scope further out of line. But remember this, what they do when you're looking through this scope, canting simply sends the bullet down a different line. And canting has the same effect at any offset of the scope and at any point of aim. It could easily be that you're aiming down here and your bullet impact is up here, and as you cant, these bullets impacts walk this way and this way from your canting. Now in reality, I drew them with a little arc. They don't have that little arc. They go in a straight line. You just cant, the gun shoots over there. You cant, the gun shoots over here. And it doesn't matter if you're aiming at your same point of impact, the bullets impact. You could be aiming right here, and when you cant the gun and the scope goes over, the gun shoots this way, this way, this way, this. And that's irrespective of how far away you're offset. I get these guys arguing on the internet about the fact that, for instance, it came up with me because I tend to hold right here and I walk my scope around for my groups. And people are like, well, that magnifies the cant. And at some point, we have to get people to think so that you people can learn to call bullshit. It doesn't matter. The only thing that changes the cant system to system is the offset of the scope to the bore. You get them further apart and it becomes obvious that the smallest amount of change swings that scope through a bigger arc. So that means that it points the barrel in different ways at to a different degree. But whether you're sighted in to destroy your own point of impact, or whether you're sighted in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 inches high, has no effect on the effect of the cant. Wherever, you could be sighted in over here. And if you cant your scope, you could be shooting 20 inches to the left. Just sighted in so that you're shooting at a target way over here. When you cant this line of sight through your scope, this group over here just moves right or left. It doesn't go up and down. It doesn't, all of the things that you think when you, oh, this one, no, it simply